This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. This episode is sponsored by C-School, the online school for creativity training. If you'd like to unleash your creative potential and access a free Creativity Blueprint training series, then just head over to c.school. That's www.c.school for your free training series. In today's episode, I speak with Malcolm and Simone Collins, and we talk about pragmatism, honesty, and happiness. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Malcolm and Simone Collins. Originally a neuroscientist focused on brain-computer interface and the evolution of human cognition, his work is on display at the Smithsonian, Malcolm Collins felt he could learn more about the ways humans interact with the world and each other by pursuing an MBA at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. There, he met Simone, his wife and co-author, who at the time was director of marketing at hubpages.com, managing a team of 20,000 freelancers. Together, they co-founded the art commission marketplace artcorgi.com, after which Malcolm became the director of strategy at South Korea's most desired source of early-stage capital, and Simone earned her graduate degree from Cambridge while working in venture capital. The couple now runs a number of travel companies with a focus on Travelmax, splitting their time between North America's headquarters in Miami, Florida, which is where they're speaking from us today, and South American offices in Lima, Peru. Their new book is called The Pragmatist Guide to Life, and it's my great pleasure having them on the show today. So welcome.
It is so wonderful to be here.
So first of all, share with everyone what's going on in your lives just now.
About 6 months ago, we bought a few companies in the U.S. and Peru. We had no intention of buying companies outside the U.S. We had no intention of buying companies in the travel industry. And we're trying to figure this out right now.
Yeah, but it turns out that Travelmax, the company we acquired, is a gem of a company. We're having a lot of fun running it. We're just learning a lot about the travel industry now. It's amazing how opaque and confusing it can be. It's not at all what you think it is.
And in our spare time, we write books and run our nonprofit, trying to save the world in our own stupid way.
So I mentioned a little bit, kind of a brief overview of your stories, but you've had these very interesting lives already. I'm wondering, what attracted you to the kind of work that you do now, which you're now in the world of kind of travel, and you're very involved in the travel business as well. Was this a natural fit for you? Are you a natural kind of travelers out exploring in the world, or was this you just saw you were very good business people and you just saw an opportunity?
I think that, it's not to say that we are averse to the field of travel. You talk about in one of your books the idea that new locations and new landscapes and new environments can spark new ideas within the creative process. Mm-hmm. And if we can facilitate that, that's something we want to be a part of. But it's not something we had ever thought about or had any background in before. The thing that got us interested in the industry is we were looking to buy a company. And when we hear about an industry where our initial reaction is, no one's doing that anymore, that's a stupid idea, that's boring, that's old. When we heard that travel agencies still made money, we were shocked. And when we heard that they were cheaper than buying tickets online, we were shocked. And we started calling our friends, the other people from, Stanford and stuff, and say, did you know this? And they're like, no, I didn't know this. And when we find one of these industries that has been forgotten by sort of, I guess, the Silicon Valley high-tech culture, but that's still a really solid industry, we get really excited about it because we know that we won't have... While the competition will be likely just as smarter than us, they won't come from the same background. And it's really hard when you're competing against a competition where all of them come from the same background as you.
And if for people that don't know Travelmax, tell us a little bit about, what it does, how it's different. I mean, I think if I'm having to book my business travel just now, my system might go on to something like Skyscanner, or we'll maybe go on Expedia, or they'll go through different routes. But most of the time they're using some kind of, let's say, platform to find the things. But we're having to do a lot of the work rather than we used to go to travel agents. How does Travelmax work?
Well, Travelmax is a hybrid wholesale agency and travel agency that works directly with corporate and leisure travelers. So what makes it different is it uses its volume to get access to contracts with airlines that offer it prices way below often what online travel agencies like Expedia or Kayak.
A better way to think about it is if I'm American Airlines and I know I can sell 80% of my seats at X price, I'm probably not going to price below X price. And then for those other 20% of seats, I sort of sell them offline, off the public marketplaces. And that's what the travel agencies do. And we're one of the largest ones in the southern United States. But let's not get too into Travelmax because we did write a book.
But the interesting thing, the reason I wanted to say Travelmax first was because your book, The Pragmatist Guide to Life, you have taken quite a pragmatic approach, because everyone thinks that, okay, the way that you book travel now is you go online, you go to a service like that, and that's the way that you do it. And companies have certain ways of doing it as well. So the thing I was kind of interested when you're with this book, this Pragmatist Guide, is something kind of made me think about all the little things in our lives where we don't stop to actually think, well, why is it that way? And I guess this maybe is like the evolutionary part of our brain because it's saving calories or whatever. So where did you, in addition to your kind of travel business, where did you get interested in living a life which is more questioning of things?
I think Malcolm grew up like that. I did not. And only until after meeting him and basically having him force a lot of questions upon me until I got more accustomed to asking them myself. I hated doing it. I mean, I still find it highly uncomfortable. I don't like that expending of energy on difficult thought. But now that I understand the value and utility of doing so, it's become a habit.
And within the world of business, I mean, where it's really helped us is it's caused us to focus on things that aren't sexy and lifestyles that aren't sexy and paths forward that aren't always sexy. And that has helped us achieve what we want to achieve. When I was looking at VC funds to work for, I was looking at VC funds in Korea and she was looking at funds in the UK, which isn't the first places people would look. And competing in marketplaces where you have some form of arbitrage, you're going to do a lot better. And you get arbitrage by competing in marketplaces where your peers aren't looking.
And the book starts off telling a kind of interesting thing, because the obviously this is a guide, the Pragmatist Guide to Life, but it's also a little bit of a kind of story about you, the two of you, and how you work together as well. That first date that you had together, I believe, was in an Indian restaurant. I'm guessing if Simone, if I'd been in your position, I might have just kind of got up and left at that point, based upon the question. So describe, for anyone that hasn't read the book yet, describe what that was like and why in the hell you stayed with this guy when he was asking some very strange questions.
Oh, goodness. Well, okay, for context, I turned 24 and I was working for the Silicon Valley startup Hub Pages, very happy there. Had everything I needed in life. I had my emergency fund and health insurance, and I traveled internationally multiple times a year, and I was extremely satisfied with my friends and everything else. So I decided I needed to finally experience love. I'd never dated before. I'd never had sex. So I figured this year I will fall in love. I will have my heart broken, and then I'll just be done with that, and I'll live alone forever and be happy. But, no one will be able to bother me with, oh, but you've never tried it. So I started dating, and yes, I met Malcolm on my 17th first date, and he was very, very different from everyone else I had dated before. He basically sat me down over Indian food at that restaurant that night, which is almost just 6 years ago now. And he said, well, I'm not really looking to date right now. I'm looking for a wife, but I'm going to find her this fall at Stanford. So
I said, there's a large pool of pre-vetted candidates there, and there really was.
Yes, but essentially he was saying,
you were approaching this like a scientist. You were saying, okay, yes. I'm going to work the numbers here, figure out the statistical significance of all of this.
Hold on. But so was she. Well, and she had a points-based system for dating. She was competing against other people in her office to win points by dating guys.
And I evaluated everyone I dated with a points-based system. And also he worked perfectly for my plans, right? I mean, what would be better than someone that I knew I would fall in love with, that I also knew had no intention of staying with me. So I insisted that we have a breakup date. And we did break up on that date. And I had hoped that I'd never see him again. It kind of went terribly wrong, apparently, or really right, however you want to look at it.
It was the worst ever breakup date.
It was, oh. Well, I mean, it was actually the best possible breakup, right? Because I'd never broken up with anyone before. I wanted to know what it felt like. I was okay for a week, and then at day 7, I just went bonkers.
I love you talking about before that. You're like, all these other people are such whiners about breakups. Because I read her private diary, and she goes, it doesn't feel bad at all.
Yeah, and then I just lost it. So it's nice to know what it feels like to lose a partner and to go through a breakup and feel terrible and then win them back. I mean, I feel like I really lucked out. But back to your question, what made me know I would immediately fall in love with Malcolm was his clarity, his honesty. The fact that he, of all these people I sat across from on dates so far, he was the first person to be honest and direct with me about anything, and assertive and clear about what he wanted from life. I mean, I dated really awesome people, many of whom were, they worked at Google, they worked at Facebook and Amazon. They were extremely smart. They'd gone to the best universities, but not only were they not really direct about what they wanted from a date or from a relationship or from even, a meal, coffee, they seemed lost in life. And Malcolm just really stood out to me, and I was compelled. I was very compelled.
And do you concur, Malcolm, with this? Was that did you feel that particular date? And I'm interested because the whole book, the premise of the book is about this idea of living intentionally, being very kind of present in that way as well. So from your parameters, was this a successful first meeting?
It's so funny you asked that. We're actually writing our second book right now, which is The Pragmatist Guide to Relationships. And I say that the most important thing when you're dating somebody is to get them to break up with you. The most important thing is that you don't end up spending the rest of your life with a mediocre partner, somebody who's not perfectly matched for you. And so what I was looking for during that period, I was trying to hit at least 5 dates a week, if not more, was for if I wasn't going to perfectly match with someone, if somebody wasn't going to be as crazy as Simone, I needed them to know how crazy I was immediately, like day one, moment one, so that they don't then feel betrayed a week later. And they're like, you didn't tell me you were a weirdo that like has points-based systems for everything and is going to be super honest about everything.
So the book, the premise of the book is this idea of obviously pragmatism, living intentionally. You have these 4 questions that you ask about how to become more intentional in life. First of all, describe why is being intentional. Why is that even something that we should value in life? So, and lots of friends that kind of go through life, they're not particularly intentional people. They seem kind of pretty happy. So why is being intentional and living intentionally something that we should value?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. And that's, I think, what really differentiates this from so many self-help books is they all assume that what people want is to be happy. And so many times, being a VC and being around all these Silicon Valley people, I'll meet people who've achieved everything they wanted, successful entrepreneurs, successful VC. And when you really get them down and have a few drinks and you talk to them, they're like, the time I felt worse in my life was when I realized I'd achieved everything I wanted and I was happy and it didn't matter. It didn't really matter to me. And it had never occurred to me to think, is happiness what I really want from my life? Is being looked up to by other people what I really want from my life? And I think that's part of what motivated us to write this.
But even if being happy is what you want to maximize in your life, I think intentionality plays a huge role in that. I mean, a lot of people become successful entrepreneurs or successful whatevers because they think if I do this, then I'll be happy. But then, maybe what would make them happier is if they went, to live in Indonesia and worked for a charity and helped people all day and could live on, pennies on a dollar for what they have to spend to live anywhere else.
It's so interesting. This, you're like, well, they seem like perfectly happy people to me. And it's like, even then they could probably be optimizing their happiness more with a different path in life than sort of this cliche societal version of success.
So, and in that, you in the book, you talk about these different questions, like one is the objective function, asking that, what is the purpose of my life? It may be happiness. It may be something else. I guess. Well, so, on that first question, before we kind of go kind of deeper as to the other parts as well, really getting your identity, your personal and your private identity. I'm wondering, how do you even go about finding the answer of that? I mean, what is the purpose of my life? One of the biggest questions. Lots of different takes on it. The one I always loved was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He said, you've got no idea what the purpose of your life until you look back at it from the end, and you kind of looked back and said, they kind of make sense. So how do we first start that journey of actually figuring out what our purpose in life, if it's maybe not necessarily happiness?
Well, I think in the end, everyone kind of has a base proclivity towards something that they value. And it changes from person to person. I think a lot of it comes down to sort of your genetics and how things sit with you. And the way that we guide people through the process in the book is to present all of the potential objective functions that we could think of, all the major categories.
Not just us. I mean, we interviewed a lot of people. We were looking at what were all of the things who drove people who really felt like they had purpose in life. And the way that we help people come up with their own answers to these questions without sort of guiding them to a point. And I love, the only negative review the book has gotten so far was somebody complaining and said, they just list like a bunch of reasons that you may have a purpose in life and then explain why everyone is wrong. And we're like, well, that's the point, because we're not taking a side here. What we're trying to do is whatever you think is obviously true, we try and provide challenges to that thing to help you think through it better.
And in the end, if intuitively that challenge feels right and you just say, yes,
or the challenge feels hollow,
yeah, then you know. And it's a very instinctual thing. And in the end, we do say this is a judgment call. And first, it could change as you change. And second, I mean, there's no right or wrong to it. So, for example, you might think, okay, what I really want to maximize in life is perfection. I want to perfect myself as much as possible. So our thought experiment with that, to test if that's really what you want from life, is to say, okay, if I could just snap my fingers and make you perfect, would you accept that? Would you have me snap my fingers? And a lot of people say, yes, just sits right with them. I want to be perfect right away. That's what I want. Other people say, no, I have to work for it. I wouldn't deserve it if you just gave it to me, which suggests that instead, perhaps their objective function revolves more around hard work and earning things and demonstrating that. So it really is just about basically subjecting yourself to a wide variety of litmus tests and seeing how you react to them.
I'm wondering, of the people that you interviewed, as you kind of started to go deep on their purpose, what they believed their purpose was, how many of them had arrived at their purpose simply because this is what the purpose of their parents had been, or the purpose of their community, or the purpose of the people that they spent time with, and therefore that ended up becoming their purpose almost just by, it was the path of least resistance, rather than actually thought deeply about it?
I mean, one of the things we're fighting against with this book is that mindset. I would say that probably only, 5 to 10% of the people we really interviewed felt like they had any sort of a purpose in life. Most of them, it was just, this is what everyone says it is, right? Helping people, and it's like, okay, define helping people. Well, I guess making people happy. Well, okay, what if you could maximize everyone in the world's happiness by putting them in a pod and you could press a button that does that right now? Would you do that? And they're like, well, no. And it's like, well, why? Because I guess I'd take away their freedom, and people say that's important. So many people follow along that path, or the standard religious pathways. I would say but not everyone does. And within almost every potential objective function, whether it be a religious-based objective function or a non-religious-based objective function, you will find people with a deep philosophical framework behind why they believe what they believe. And as Simone always says, all we're really trying to get people to is a place where they show their work and they feel fairly confident they have the correct answer.
But we don't care what your answer is as long as you show your work.
So when you go that one step down, so you've figured out, okay, this is my purpose in life. Then you go that next step down. It's like, okay, well, how do I fulfill or express that purpose in my life as well? What are some of the questions that we need to be thinking of there? Because, okay, I've got a sense that my ladder is up against the right wall, but I have no idea the best way of kind of really getting up that wall, if I'm going to go up the ladder, or if I should choose a different ladder, or if I maybe should just kind of get around it in some other way.
There's sort of two core sets of questions here. One of the questions is around sort of how you choose what evidence you use to overturn your sort of, you talk about the hypotheses first, Simone.
Right. So that section we focus around, the term we use is building ideology trees, which is essentially an ideology in our book is a hypothesis on how you think things are supposed to work out. Like, okay, if I think that I want to be a president, and all presidents go to Ivy League schools might be a hypothesis, and that could either be proven right or wrong. And that's what's different from ideologies when compared to objective functions is ideologies can be proven wrong. They're just a hypothesis.
Yeah, or I think that, the Democratic Party is the right party to achieve my objective function, or I think that this particular political issue is the correct political issue to identify my objective function.
Right.
There are things that can be proven wrong with a certain set of evidence. And what's very important, because they can be proven wrong, is that you think through and you define the type and amount of evidence necessary to disprove your various ideologies. So evidence could be anything from an expert consensus on a subject to a scientific paper on a subject.
Or a personal experience.
To a personal experience. And sort of the example we use there to sort of help people think through it is, whether you believe in ghosts or don't believe in ghosts. Suppose you saw a ghost in front of you. Would you change your belief on that? Like if you didn't believe in ghosts, would seeing one in front of you make you say, I believe in ghosts? Or would it make you say, oh, I'm obviously developing schizophrenia? Or would reading it in the New York Times? Or would seeing a scientific paper on it? What amount and type of evidence would you need to change your mind on this? And would you see that amount or type of evidence if it came through the regular news cycle or was, in the world?
Or do you need to seek it out?
So you're kind of going out with, you have these kind of set of assumptions. I mean, one of the companies that you started before, Gigaverse, the whole point of that was to teach people how to make a living doing what they loved. That's probably a big reason a lot of people start companies around this kind of area, lifestyle as well. So you obviously sense that was the purpose, but it was wrong. Why was it wrong? Was it the wrong purpose that you were going for, or was it that you were not finding the best way to fulfill that purpose? This was not the best vehicle in order to fulfill that purpose.
Well, what we ultimately found was we'd created basically a detailed university for this that trained people how to do it, that showed them what to avoid, and here are the resources that are most helpful, and here are the best practices. The problem is that most people who decide that they want to pursue their dream are also inherently lazy because they also happen to be human. So that's just going to happen. And they didn't want to read guides or inform themselves. They just wanted to immediately start making money, doing whatever it is that they loved. So basically, we created this massive, amazing resource after doing extensive research and interviews, and nobody used it. Which, I mean, we should have seen that coming a mile away. It was pretty dumb of us, but we were young.
We were more focused on, let's do this thing that, if it worked, would fulfill our wildest dreams about what our lives should be, without really considering, we're like, well, of course it will work because people want to do this, but we forgot that people were people.
So that was I guess that's one ideological tree. You thought this was the best way to achieve the particular purpose that you had, but it wasn't kind of right for you. I'm wondering how soon in the process did you kind of sense, okay, this is wrong, and as you were even kind of going into businesses, like creating businesses, were you thinking, I have a set of assumptions, these are experiments, I'm going to try my best to see where these experiments lead, but I'm not going to necessarily become too attached to the eventual outcome? Or was it, I'm going to hell for leather, I'm going to make this work regardless?
God, we learned so much from it, but I think that there's sort of this MVP approach. But what people forget is we're really good at lying to ourselves about whether or not our tests are working.
Yeah.
About whether or not when we test a community, when we do surveys, we construct surveys that give us the results we want, until we failed a few times. And then you learn not to do that. I guess if I was going to take any, sort of heuristic from that I would give to other people is don't spend more than 1K on something until you've made at least 1K from it after that.
So what kind of responses have you been getting to the book? Because it's a route less traveled, I'm guessing, for people to take this approach to life, be more questioning. And then in the book, you start talking about how to really ask yourself questions around your personal identity. Like, what do you want to be, your public identity, how you want others to see you, perceive you. What's been the response to the book, and have there been any has there been any responses that have maybe delighted, intrigued, angered you to the book?
I would say that we've gotten a lot of responses to the book, and they've been pretty much, of anyone who's read the book, holistically super positive. except for one who was a speed reader, one of these people who reads like 25 books a day. She hated it. But we say in the book, like, you got to take your time on this book. One of the responses we got today was a review. I'm always obsessed with the reviews, and I'm always reading the reviews as soon as they come out. And this person, one of these Amazon top 100 reviewers, who writes these like page and a half reviews, grew up in a cult. And they were talking about how important this book was to them because it was, I guess, almost sort of like an anti-cult to them. It was a book that didn't, the reason cults work, the reason cults spread is because having somebody else tell you what to think and believe is easy. I mean, we pretend and we have these self-images that say, I don't want other people to tell me what to think. But the reality is that every human, as soon as you say, well, here's the tricky parts about what you believe, they say, okay, then what? What's true then? And our book doesn't have answers to that. It doesn't say, okay, what's true then? It just says, well, here's what makes every potential answer tricky. And I loved so much that this person was like, this is one of both the hardest books I've ever read and one of the most meaningful I've ever read.
What has surprised me most, honestly, about the response from people who've read the book and followed up with us is how many people are asking us for connection, for a social club, for some kind of group that can talk about these things. And I think perhaps it's because there aren't that many people in the world who are comfortable. This is not dinner time with family conversation. This is not, hey, let's question our values. You can't bring that up with a colleague. You can't bring that up with a friend.
I'm not sure other people's happiness means anything. I'm not sure my own happiness means anything. Yeah, there's no one you can go to and talk about that where they don't already have an agenda that they're going to try and shut,
Or it's just, it makes people really uncomfortable and they shut it down. I mean, I feel like the only context, if I personally wanted to have these conversations, was I'd probably go on a lot of dates. Like, I'd get on OkCupid or Tinder and just start dating a bunch of people.
Just try and source as many
because
ideas.
like that way, I feel like on dates, when you meet someone, there isn't this presumption that you have to behave a certain way or like.
But I mean, I feel like what most people are going to go to is they're going to say, okay, I'll go to my pastor. But you know what your pastor is going to say.
But anyway.
Or I'll go to my, this professor of philosophy. But you know what he's going to say.
Yeah. But the problem is that no one really just wants to talk through it and think about it. So my biggest surprise is just how much people want to talk with someone else who isn't going to choose an answer already and who's willing to have that discussion.
But essentially, I mean, I recently interviewed Eric Ries, who wrote the very influential book as well, and you'll know in the especially in Silicon Valley and tech world, Lean Startup. And he said that was one of the things that really kind of surprised, delighted him, but he didn't expect at all, was how quickly they wanted to build a community started to build around some of the ideas in his book. And he said, he at the start, he said, I don't feel like a leader of this at all. I'm just going to put these ideas out there, and these other people come to do things together. And then they're asking me, hey, we're getting a lean startup group together in Austin. Would you come and have a chat with us and speak to us as well? But it was completely organic in trying to do that as well. So I'm wondering, is this where we're going to see this book going next? You're going to having lots of kind of more like a meetup type of way of expanding it, or you mentioned kind of going to the pragmatist guide of relationships. Are you going to start to take the overall idea and really focus on different areas of our lives?
It's going to be a hybrid approach. We're definitely going to publish future books because it's still something we enjoy doing very much, writing, and we're not going to stop writing. But with regard to pragmatism in general, we all the profits of our book go towards the Pragmatist Foundation, and we do want to direct the funds of the Pragmatist Foundation towards giving people a social network and some social resources to help them think through these problems. But to be honest, we also feel like older generations, adults, even late teens in many cases, are already ossified or too far down a path to maybe be able to truly think about these things. And we really want to start investing in after-school programs and other groups for kids and teens that allows them a safe place to talk about these
Humorously,
things.
after-school programs is where we're really focused because we're trying to get people open to the idea of sort of considering these new ideas. And I think that we're trying to build a social club. We're trying to build the framework of this, but we're so sketchy about it because I've seen these groups build with good intentions of the past and just collapse upon themselves. Like I saw with the Less Wrong community, where it ended up being dominated by everyone who was unemployed because they had the most time to post. but they weren't necessarily the people who had the best ideas about where the community should go, and it ended up going in really weird directions. And so we're both hesitant. Like, we want to make sure that as the community grows, it grows in the right ways. But a problem that we're facing is, I think a lot of people who write books like this is their income, promoting themselves, teaching entrepreneurs how to make money. That's their income and their lives. Well, we are, our day job is running a company that has, well over $100 million a year in sales. And so, we've got other people's jobs to worry about. And so this has to be a hobby for us, which means this community will probably develop more slowly than other communities, especially since we're trying to control it so much from the top down.
Well, it's a fascinating area as well. And I think this idea of pragmatism, there's probably never been maybe a better time for pragmatism just now, because we have, obviously, the past few years, we've seen some very kind of dogmatic ways of doing things, especially within politics all over the world as well. It seems to be a general thing. So this idea of questioning and having a more pragmatic approach is definitely something like a Cicero, where I think would have maybe appreciated if it had been happening back then as well. So if people want to learn more about the book, the foundation, and other things that you've got going on, where's the best place that they should go?
You can visit pragmatist.guide, which is our website, or go to amazon.com and search for The Pragmatist Guide to Life. And if you want to get in touch with either of us, you can email either Simone, Simone, or Malcolm, Malcolm, at pragmatist.guide.
And the book's always on sale at the cheapest price we're allowed by Amazon, because we really don't care about that. We just think, it's a tough read. So, if you can handle that, congrats.
And if you do read it, I would encourage you to leave a review, because Malcolm will definitely read that read that review as well. Malcolm, Simone, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. A really kind of interesting, wide-ranging kind of conversation. We could have definitely kind of gone on in this as well. But thank you so much for coming on. I wish you all the best with the book and everything you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.